So I'm going to short-circuit things a little bit, because this is all preliminary. And at the beginning, you usually have to take a few things for granted. You have to say, oh, well, the teacher says that must be true, or something like that. But then when we get into it, later we'll reflect why these things are true. The result of this is there are only 8 scientific areas on account of what I've done earlier. There's logic, which deals with the order in the mind. There's philosophy of nature, philosophy of being. What that means, by the way, existence. What kind of existence is it? How many kinds of existence there are? There are 10 kinds of beings, or to be more accurate, 10 modes of beings, because they're not alike, so they're only called modes. They're only analogically alike. 10 ways a thing can be, and that's what metaphysics is about. It's the ultimate science that measures every other science. If there's no metaphysics, forget it. I was asked to present a paper in response to the Pope's recent statement to educators. He made a very excellent statement on education to educators. And the Academy of Sciences has asked me to respond to that with a paper. The more I got into what the Pope said, the more I realized the magnificence of what he said. But what he laid emphasis on is metaphysics, the ultimate science. If there's no metaphysics, my friend, every other science goes down the drain. It's that important. We'll see more of that as we go along. So the philosophy of being, which we call metaphysics. Then there's ethics and poetics. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then there's math, that's 6. Then there's sacred theology. Which is a study about God and his relationship to us, and to know everything we can based upon what he revealed. The principles in all these other sciences, we grasp them with our own human intellects. The whole is greater than its part. But in sacred theology, God revealed them to us. The principles. That's what that's about. That's another science. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, philosophy of nature has an equivocal science called empirical sciences. And that's all those natural sciences, what we usually call the natural sciences. This is natural philosophy, that's natural sciences. So there are only 8 scientific areas. You've covered all science by seeing those 8. There is another one, a 9th. We can have practically no knowledge of it. It's the science of God known from God's viewpoint. God known from God's viewpoint. He has that. When he tells us there are 3 persons in one God, he's revealing a little bit of it to us. And we take that and make that into a science, and we call it sacred theology. And it's quite a big science. I have 5 big volumes in Latin, and Latin condenses things, for instance, on that. So there are the 5 sciences. And some of them are empirical or perinoetic, like empirical sciences. They're based upon experiment, observation. That'll suffice for chapter 1, our introduction. Now we're going to start on our course proper, at least make a beginning. So chapter 2, man in general. Little a, man is a unified substance and an operational whole. What does that mean? He's one substance. If you've got a black eye, you'll feel it. You'll go around, boy, my eye hurts. Or somebody trod on your sore foot. Oh, get off my foot. They're for me to stand on, not you. Or something like that. So those points that he's one substance, we know that. We're one substance, all one being. We know that my toe, my hand, my head, they're all one continuous substance. The physiologist works out the details of that. And we're an operational whole. That is to say, we're one whole being that operates. Now, if a cop pulls me up for going through a stop sign, I didn't do it, officer, my hands did it. Who's going to believe that? I mean, that's obviously ridiculous, isn't it? Which reminds me, did you hear about the fellow that rang 911? Heard about this last week. He rang 911 and said, my wife's had a bad accident, quick, send some help. The dispatch says, we'll have an ambulance on the way, quick, what's your address now? He said, 1516 Eucalyptus Street. How do you spell that, said the dispatcher. And the fellow hesitated for a minute or two. He said, oh, look, I'll drag her around to Oak Street and you can pick her up there. So, each man is one substance and acts as one substance. He's always recognized as one human person. It is Bob who exists and Bob who operates. Bob drives a car, not his hands. Bob has an ID. His being is one. He does as one being. He suffers as one being. Bob's arm's not a part of him, not in the same way as a wheel is part of a bicycle. It's a continuous part of him. His form bestows unity on his substance. The same applies to a tree or a dog. You know, a tree dies partially before it dies wholly. That is to say, you'll see a branch die. And the same happens with humans. I saw a man, 93 years of age, and he had those piercing blue eyes that I've seen on people who are highly intelligent sometimes. Of course, you know, in the study of physiology, blue eyes are undeveloped eyes. They're baby eyes. When they go brown, that's when they're fully developed. But this man, then later I heard, he'd almost died. His head was still alive and he could talk to people, but his body was partly dead. We have that when we get gangrene of a leg. That man, by the way, was Father Woodbury's father. I remember him many years ago. So we can die part at a time. I've seen a raccoon hide behind a tree, even if his body is too wide for the tree, but he's protecting himself by protecting the most important part, his head. It happened to be up in the near north in Canada on one occasion. I heard a scratching during the night. I thought neighbours were packing up to leave or something in this camping area. I got up and had a look, and there's a raccoon, glared at me and then took off and hid behind a tree. And I could see him behind the tree, hiding. And his tree was about that wide, and his body was about that wide. And a geologist doing research in Australia told me he saw the same thing happen with wallabies, the Australian small kangaroo species. You know what you get when you cross a kangaroo with a bottle of whiskey, don't you? A wobbly wallaby. So the wallabies do the same. They'll hide behind a little stick and think they're hiding from you, but you can see them, big as they are. So a child in the womb is not part of the mother. I remember when that was being pushed here in the United States, it's only a part of the mother. Students told me that. We take appendix out, why can't we take the child out? You know, there are times when a student once asked me, is it ever lawful to use what's called argumentum ad hominem in logic, arguing against the person? Is it ever lawful to use that? I said yes, and I have used it. I said to a girl in a class, I was teaching at the time science de gestion. In English you'd call it management sciences. That'd be the thing it was called in English. Management science. And this girl said something to me. There was something like 14 lads and one girl all along in front of me. I had about 134 students in that class. And I said, that's not true, and you know it. She started to grin and then nodded. She did know it. She was pulling my leg. There are times when you've got to do that with the students. That's not true, mister, and you know it's not true. And they've admitted it. So to say that the child in the womb is a part of the mother, that's where I've used that too. The child has its own existence, and the mother is the instrument of the child. The child's in charge, not the mother. People speak from total lack of physiology and anatomy and things they say about this. Psychiatry depends on this unity and operational wholeness. Psychiatry depends upon that. Namely, the physician says to himself, I'll see what this person does, then I'll know what's wrong with them. The kind of things they dream about, the kind of things they talk about, especially the kind of things they love, as Aristotle pointed out. Get to know the nature of the person. If we're tired, it's hard to think. The form, we call what makes a thing be a thing, whatever's in a thing that makes it be what it is. The ancients called it idea. The Latins translated to forma, meaning form. The form of a thing, not the shape, but there's a substantial principle contained in every being called form, which makes it be what it is and not something else. In the case of living things, it's called a soul. We'll speak more about that later. It gives unity and continuity to a living organism. So man is a unified substance and an operational whole. B, man's operations are subordinated among themselves. They're subordinated. That means sub, under, ordered under. They're directed. One is under another. The will directs the imagination, drives the imagination. The imagination drives the locomotive power. The locomotive power drives my legs and I walk. When I want to eat supper, my intellect tells me, and my tummy tells me, that I'm hungry. Well, we order ourselves to go to the table and ask Fifi to wait on the table for us. So, in other words, they're all ordered amongst themselves. But some are ordered under others. I say to myself, I hear a sound. Right, the sound is related to me, and then I turn my head. Everything's subordinated amongst themselves, ordered amongst themselves, if you like. Just use that word. Nutritive power functions for his brain, which in turn functions for his imagination, and which functions for his mind. Bob can only love what he knows. Nobody can love something unless they know what it is. And here's a principle. Here's our first principle of reason. There can be no coordination without subordination. You can't have something directed to another without some subordination. The military takes this so carefully, all through the history of the military. If an officer gave me an order and I said, go to hell, oh boy, there'd be court-martial. And what's the reward for that disobedience? Put him up against a brick wall and shoot him. Revolt in the army is considered a terrible crime because it's so necessary to maintain the integrity of the army and have it functioning all as one unit, one organism as it were. But what we've been dealing with is this so far. This is a principle now I'm going to give you. I've had the great honour of meeting students of mine at funerals in different places, students I haven't taught for years. And they say there's one principle they'll never forget. Do follows be. In other words, the kind of something is, what it does be, that's how it'll do. A dog does like doggies do. He'll produce little doggies. He won't produce pussycats. And cats will chase mice. We had, in studying logic, we use a lot of funny syllogisms, a lot of funny reasonings just to illustrate points. This one, for instance. Dogs chase cats. Cats chase mice. Therefore, dogs chase mice. Well, it's false, but you've got to find out, the student has to find out why it's false. You've got to find out exactly why it's false. So, do follows be. In other words, something does be a cat, therefore it'll do like a cat. In other words, it has cat nature. Everything follows its nature. Everything follows its nature. That's what that really means. But do follows be. Let me say it again in more elaborate form. Do follows be, and the mode of doing follows the mode of being. In other words, everything operates according to the kind of being it is. Every science depends upon that. I can remember us being given a little tube of a white powder in a chemistry lab. And you're asked, all it had on it was a number. Tell me what that is. It didn't specifically say. We just dished out, each one of us, one substance. We had to go and analyse it, and may have to do 10, 15 analyses of something or other, maybe only a couple, depending what the substance was. And you could find out what it was. You knew that it's going to behave according to its nature. So if you see something out there, it behaves like a dog, barks like a dog, it must be a dog. So, do follows be is a supreme principle here. And there can be no coordination without subordination. By the way, my hands go where my mind directs them. That's subordination. I know Jenna won't mind me mentioning her. But this young woman with epilepsy, sometimes her hands won't go where she wants them to. But the frustration I see in her must be tremendous when she wants her hands to go to here and they'll go there. Something is terribly wrong when that happens. If there's no unity with subordination in living things, then my hands might go in one direction and my feet in another in their operations. All this can be said about brute animals. A kangaroo will look, swivel his body, and twitch his ears like a horse, all coordinated to see if there are enemies, dogs, or perhaps man might be a threat to him. I was on Jack Perrett's sheep station, you'd call it a sheep ranch, one time. And he said, if you can get that big bugger out there, he said, I'll be grateful to you. This big kangaroo is eating up grass like fury. So I saw myself after I followed up a kangaroo pad, a trail going up into the hills, and there he was, and here am I, all ready to shoot him. I took a look at him, and he's standing there, and I saw what he was doing. He was not only watching me, but he's watching around. Any dogs, if I got any dogs with me or anything like that, he's looking around, he's swiveling like, they can swivel around on their haunches, and twitch his ears like a horse. Only fired one shot, and I think the rifle sights were a little out, I knew that, and I twitched one of his ears. Then he turned and faced me, and I said, all right, you win, and I ran for my life. So the animals, they all operate according to their own style, their own method. Plants the same. Don't we watch plants? What is it, Sally, isn't it, on the television? What's her name that gives advice on Saturday mornings to gardeners? Forgotten her name. And she always says, oh, such and such, they'll do this, or such and such, they'll do that. They know the operation according to the nature of each plant. So that's a little bit about man in general, my friends. So 2b, chapter 2b. We're dealing in chapters, of course. And chapters refer to this text that I've written, not akin to any other book. Man and vital operation. Little a, the living are known through their operations. Now there's a special principle. Absolutes are known from themselves. Relatives are known from other things. Pardon me. When things are related, we know what they are from their relationship. They're always, sight is related to colour. Hearing related to sound. I can't see the sound, but I can hear it. touch is related to the resistant. There are probably two touches. It's not important enough for anybody to worry too much about. There's the resistant or there's the thermic. One's hot and cold, one's hard and the other's soft, etc. That kind of two kinds of touch. So there are possibly 6 senses altogether. But what each operation we do, we know what it is, its nature, from what it's related to. Chemistry. Is that what Professor Smith teaches? No. Chemistry is a science related to substantial changes. Botany. Do we know what botany is from what Professor Josephine or something teaches? No. We know what botany is from what it's related to. It's related to the operations of plants, the movement of plant life, etc., etc. So, to determine something that's relative, we always have to know what it's related to. Sight's related to colour, hearing to sound, taste to the gustable, if you like, and smell to the odorous, and touch to the resistant. All these things. You know, we had to study in the Institute of Psychology at the University of Montreal, as well as in the Faculty of Philosophy in the Institute of Medieval Studies. And you know, psychologists never get into all these things. They have, like Woodworth said, there are 102 passions. But the philosopher said there are only 11. But the psychologist divides them up, from any whim and fancy. But the philosopher divides them up according to what they're related to. So absolutes are specified or put into the species of things, or known, their nature's known from what they are in themselves. Relatives to what they're related to. So that's how we're going to know all the passions, all the internal senses, the external senses, by what they're related to. Shoes are relative things related to feet. Tootsies. Dentist forceps are related to teeth. Sight's related to colour. Science of geometry is related to shape. And a journey is related to New York City. Always know, and you remember those that studied ethics with me, that how we determined always those things, you have to take into account the end. It's the same as the related. These are all distinguished by that to which they're essentially related. We'll see more of this as we go along. We distinguish powers by their objects. If it's a journey, we'll call it an end. If it's a power, we'll call it an object. The word object is an interesting word. Ob plus jacere. There's no J in Latin, but you use the I. Usually it's written I-A, etc. Ob in Latin means confronting. Now, this thing confronts me. We call it an obstruct, an obstruction. Struct means built. Ob, in front of me. Something built in front of me. That's what the word obstruction means. So, the object means what's thrown in front of me. We've got the English word from this, javelin. That comes from that word. Came through the French into English. Well, jacere in Latin means to throw. Thrown in front of me. So the object is what is thrown in front of me. The subject, if I'm talking about a subject, is what's thrown under. The study that's thrown under our minds that we're getting control of is philosophical psychology. That's the subject. That's another word, but similar. But what we're concerned about is the object. Ob is the critical word there, that preposition in Latin. We distinguish powers by their objects. We must distinguish object and thing. Object, a thing can be many objects. Here's a thing. It's the object of hearing. It's the object of sight. Object means what's thrown up in front. Thing means that which exists. That's what a thing is. Whatever exists. A being is and thing are same sort of word in a way. A being is. Emphasis on the is. But a thing is Emphasis on the what. That's the difference between the two words. We think about things. We must always think about things. We can't think about something, it's a no thing. So, one man can be the object of physics, anatomy, sight, sociology, geometry, and chemistry, and economics. We talk about men. So, one thing can be many objects. So, what it confronts, that's what object means. What does it confront? Well, here we want to study that according to its mode of being and operation. So the principle is, absolutes are specified from themselves, but relatives are specified from another. Absolutes specified or put into species of things or known, their natures are known from themselves. Relatives are from another, from something they're related to. We can also state that principle in another way. Acts, habits, and powers are specified by their formal objects. We'll skip that for the moment because we'll be dealing with it in a better way to understand it later. So now we must look for the object of living actions. What is the object of living actions? What is it that's so special about something that's living? Some years ago, a group of us were in Channel 9 in Ottawa. Outside, they were a pro-life organisation. And they asked me to come along. I had given them some lectures, and they asked me to come along to this Channel 9, where there was a sort of an investigation going on. There were a couple of dozen people altogether. And there are women, I'm sitting down, these women are standing here talking, there were plenty of chairs around, but one said, how do you know when something is human? They said, I don't know. These are the experts going on to television. God save us from the experts. Yes. Then one says, how do you know when something's alive? Gee, I don't know. Well, I sat there and I thought the most logical thing they're going to say to me, could you say something, tell us something about that? But they didn't mention it. I thought, what confounded ignorance. Yet they're the experts going on there. When we got onto television, they hardly had anything to say, these experts. David Dealer, a lawyer, and I did most of the talking, but of course there's always somebody in the crowd that always speaks up, and when you've got somebody nailed to the wall, they always cut in and destroy the whole argumentation, you know. That's why whenever I give a lecture anywhere, I want to know who's going to be there and is anyone else going to speak and what the hell are they going to say. So, everything functions according to the kind of being it is. And what makes it be the kind of being it is, as we see in cosmology, it's form. It's form. What is in the thing, call it whatever you like. We call it the inside fixer. What inside a thing fixes it to be what it is. This is man. That is a tree. That is a monkey. I think I got them in the right order. Sorry, Dennis. He can get me after for that. But anyway, the thing is, what makes each one of those beings be what it is? The form. This book is red, because it's got the form of red. This book is heavy, it's got the form of heavy. This book is in this place, at this time, has a form, something that makes it be what it is. And there are two kinds of forms. One which makes it be the substance it is, and one which makes it be the kind of substance it is. For instance, it's a tall tree, it's got the form of tallness. It's a fat kangaroo, it's got the form of kangaroo and the form of fatness. Socrates was the first one to really put this forward, 25 centuries ago. And Socrates, somebody said to him, well, Socrates, should we say there's a form of mud? Yes, if we're logical, we should. Whatever bees, whatever is, it's some form of something that is doing the ising. So, What we want to know is, what is the form of a living thing make it be what it is? We want to know what the proper activity of living things is. We should, I don't think we've got enough time to do that, but we should study a little bit of cosmology, but we'll do that in a proper place, I think. It comes a little further down. So first of all, in order to discover what makes living things be living, we've got to compare it with non-living, to see what they've got in common, then to see what's proper to living. Now the word proper comes from proprios in Latin. 80% of our language has been determined now comes from Greek or Latin. 80%. A lot of the things we have come directly from Latin into English. See, there are 4 great influences on the English language. It's of such interest to me and to a lot of other people that I thought I just might mention them now. 4 great, and you'll understand why we have to be careful of the use of our language. First, there were the Romans in the 1st century, conquering Great Britain. Now, they brought Latin into English directly. Then there was St. Augustine, Christianizing England rather. He brought Latin directly in it. Then there was the Norman invasion, 1066. Now, this time, Latin came through the French into English. And the words were changed a bit according to the French method of expression. Then finally came the scientific invasion. Those 4 influences influenced the English Latin. These came directly from the Latin, these came different. 1066, the Norman French brought Latin words into English, but through the French. So you can get one Latin word with 2 meanings in English. Here's an example of that. Conceptus in Latin. It means a concept. It also means conceived. Because when you get a concept in the mind, the mind is really conceiving. Just when a woman conceives in the womb, so the mind conceives. We'll explain that in great detail later. So one came strictly, we've got the concept in English, which means the idea in the mind, if you like. And the other one means, come through the French, is conceit. Well, if I said, Jenna, have you got the concept? She'd say yes. But I said, if you've got the conceit, she'd slap my face, and rightly so, if I said, have you got conceit? So we can have these what are called doublets. One night going to bed, I thought of one of these. Oh, it was so uproariously funny, and I said, oh, I've got to write that down in the morning. I didn't. Sertillange says, anybody who's interested in any kind of intellectual work should never go to bed without pencil and paper or pen and paper. Never. So these doublets are quite interesting. There are many of them. So that's what causes a lot of problems with the English language. We have so many other words. I mean, we've got 16, I think, from Arabic and things like that. Now, we've got to compare the living with the non-living. This is making a real start now on our course. And what I'll do with tonight, we'll just have time to deal with this basics, and then we'll go over them next class again. This basics I'm going to do now. Let's see what happens to a non-living thing. By the way, has everybody filled in a card for us? Has everybody filled a card? Anybody hasn't?
I have.
And then also signed in the sheet. Did you sign the attendance sheet, everybody? Thank you. So, let's look at a non-living thing. Say, hot coffee. You put spoon in there, and you get hot spoon. Get hot spoon. Non-living things always affect something other than themselves in their operations. You get hot coffee, causes heat in the spoon. This is called transitive operation. Trans, across. It, in Latin, comes from a verb, eo. Doesn't look like it, but it does. The past participle is itus. There it is there. Ex, it. Ex means out of, it goes out of. So it means to go. It goes across from one to the other. So it comes from that verb. Eo means I go. And it goes across from one to another. This is the agent, the one that does the job. The spoon is the patient, the one that suffers the action. You've got to get used to those terms. So the agent is one thing, and the spoon is another thing. The hot is the principle of the action. Acid. Acid will corrode metal. It doesn't do anything to itself, it does it for others. A transitive action. Now let's compare that with a horse. A horse eats hay, you get more horse. There's a big notice in the city of Sydney, where I come from, which says, I don't know, the government, some health department or somebody put it up there, what you eat today walks and talks tomorrow. Travelling in the suburban railway system, you can't help but see this big sign. So the horse, you get more horse. The horse does the action, and the horse benefits from the action. This is called imminent action. Imminent action. Now there are three words in the English language. This is one thing about philosophy, by the way. You extend your vocabulary and you do it intelligently. There is a word, there's imminent, eminent, eminent, and there's imminent, immanent, eminent, imminent. Eminent means, min means stick. Min means stick. So it sticks out. He's a very eminent person. They call a cardinal your eminence. He stands out. Person that sticks out, stands out, sticks out. Imminent, the N is changed to an M because it's easier to pronounce. An imminent person, imminent thing, a storm is imminent. Ike down there is an imminent disaster down in San Antonio, isn't it? It's imminent, it's about to happen, sticks within, sticks in this moment, sticks in this hour. That's a different word. But immanent, man means stay, stay within. That was an N originally, became an M because it's easier to pronounce. So an imminent is something about to happen. Eminent, somebody sticks out. Imminent stays within, remains within. So this is an imminent action. The principle of the action is in the horse, and the term of the action is in the horse. It terminates in the horse. He does the act, he benefits from the act. When Bob falls in love with Betty, Betty doesn't even know he exists, but he can fall in love with her. Like I see a lot of people now with Sarah falling in love with her. Beautiful, isn't she? So, so the horse does the action and benefits from the action. Bob falls in love with Betty. He's doing the act of falling in love, and he benefits from that. She doesn't even know he exists, because we're talking now in the psychic order. So there's the distinction between living and non-living things. Non-living things, it perfects other. The spoon has hot added to it. We'll say that perfects other. In other words, the beneficiary is the other. not itself. It doesn't do something for itself, it does something for somebody else. And giving it extra being, and the more being things have, the more perfect they become. But in immanent action, we don't need these two. In immanent action, the horse is the agent and the horse is the patient. The horse does the act and the horse benefits from the act. So there's the distinction between living and non-living. And we're going to see that with the imagination, with the intellect, with the will. We're going to see all those things, the four internal senses, etc., sense consciousness and imagination and sensitive memory and the sense consciousness. So there's the fundamental distinction. There's more to it than that. I'll just give you a little inside glimpse of that. Here, there are always thirds formed. What you get is not spoon, not hot, but a compound, a composite of the two. So always get thirds in non-living actions. Here you do not get thirds. Horse plus hay don't make hay-fied horse or horsey-fied hay. You don't get those two. You just continue to get horse. What the horse eats today walks and talks tomorrow. But in non-living things, vastly different. We get a third always forms, which is neither coffee, nor hot, nor spoon. It's hot spoon. A third results. A great German named Immanuel Kant made an awful blunder. He thought knowledge operated like that. How these 18th century Germans and people like it could make such big blunders. Why? Because they didn't bother to read the great masters. Didn't read St. Thomas. The number of people I've talked about with St. Thomas, for instance. He's saint. One man said, well, you'd be a Catholic then and you must be prejudiced. I cannot believe there are so many dishonest people in the world who can't look at a thing scientifically and say, let's examine that. I love the person who says, I don't understand that. But the young man who says, the older man. What was his name? I've forgotten his name for a minute. He's in the classroom. This was the third class. I hadn't noticed this man with a bristling moustache, grey hair and greying, handsome-looking man sitting in the classroom about where you are, Dolores. He's sitting about there, and he suddenly said, I don't agree. Pardon? Don't agree with what? I hadn't said anything yet. I was merely illustrating what somebody said. He said, I think Kant was right. Oh, what was he right in? What did he say? I don't know, but I think he was right. A student using a more vulgar term than I'll use, he said, he's a bloody jackass. The student sitting down the back, about where you are, sir. And Mike was his name, that's right. And Mike turned around and says, are you talking about me? And the student says, no, I was talking to him. And Mike didn't see the difference. He didn't last long. I found out he'd been in every teacher. Did you ever have him, Mike Libbers? Yeah.
I don't remember.
Bill Gannon did. And they're all everybody in the department, I think, except you had him in the class. He'd drive a semi-trailer down south somewhere, last I heard. Anyway, but you see, the principal theory or the principal treatise in all our philosophy is the theory of knowledge, because there are three great principles, and the other two analyze and perfect this one. But knowledge, what is the natures of things which is in the intellect? How can we know intellectually? And when you compound them like this, like Kant did, that's why we had the First World War and the Second World War, my friends. Chesterton made a remark. A landlady doesn't want to know what her tenant's bank account is, but she sure does want to know what his philosophy is. If he's got plenty of money, bad philosophy, he'll run out and won't pay his account. So philosophies do awful things to men if they're bad philosophies. They've got to be good philosophies. We'll finish up there tonight. Thank you very much for your careful attention.
Yeah.